Prison Days, Book 2, July.
Written by Simon King. Narrated by Todd Waites. July Introduction. It was such an amazing experience for me to release the first volume in this series. I was nervous, almost as nervous as that late autumn day when I first stepped behind the walls. Almost. Although it may have sounded like a crazy month to you, June was a pretty average sort of month. Apart from what happened to my good friend Con, the rest of the experiences you read about are pretty much how most workdays play out here. This month, however, was not. Things happened that I would have never expected, even for this place. I'm still shocked from a couple of the incidents and angry from a couple of others. I don't want to spoil the ride for you, so let's not delay any longer. Put on your seatbelt, keep your arms and legs inside the moving vehicle at all times, and enjoy the ride that was July in a maximum security prison. Sunday, July 1st. Called in for overtime today. Was given a choice between Visit Center and Murray North. Murray, being a management unit, means prisoners are on 23-hour lockdown and given an hour out in one of 6 chook pens. I know it can be quite challenging working in there, but I decided to take it anyway. I haven't spent much time in there and am keen for a bit more experience. I arrive at the unit a little after 7, around 30 minutes before my scheduled shift. 2 officers are already in the unit, one the night officer, the other a 6 o'clock start. I greet both, shake hands, then take my bag out the back and put my lunch in the fridge. When I come back out, the night officer gives me a brief rundown of the previous night. There's one prisoner on suicide watch, although only an S3, hourly observations, and I recognize the name immediately, Jesse Thompson. Ah, Jesse Thompson, I say, pointing at the name. The night officer, John Simons, nods. Came back from hospital yesterday afternoon. He's been pretty quiet, he says, pointing at one of the monitors. Jesse is lying on his bed and appears to be sleeping. The other officer, a man named Russell Rosley, looks at the monitor. Were you there when he sliced himself up? Yeah, I was there. I did the cell search that sent him over the edge, I reply. Russell shakes his head. What a clown. Just then the door opens and 2 more officers enter. The full complement of officers in Murray North is 6 officers by day and 1 by night. A supervisor is also present for most of the day. Janine Riley and Jacob Davidson wave as they walk to the back. Another officer, Paul Jackson, and the supervisor, Julia Billings, enter a few minutes later. I'm asked if I want to run the book today, and I agree, a little apprehensively. The book can be quite daunting in any unit, let alone a unit where I've had little experience. It involves manning the console for prisoner communications, answering phone calls, and organizing the running of specific events such as visits, medications, and runouts. The soup gives me a clap on the back and says, "You'll be fine, mate. Don't be shy." I smile and sit at the console. Russell and Janine grab the muster folder and make their way to the cells to begin morning count. The night officer bids us farewell and heads out, one last wave as he walks out of sight. I watch Russell and Janine as they make their way around the cells, dropping each trap and peering in. The soup stands next to me and asks if I have heard anything about Khan. I shake my head. I know he is still in the coronary care unit, but not sure when he'll be let out. Probably not for a while. Code Black, Murray North, suddenly comes over the radio. What? Where? I hear the soup say. I look around, then up to the top tier. Ma'am, we need to open the cell, Janine shouts from the cell door. He's not answering us. He's lying on the floor. The soup walks to the stairs and I follow as control announces the code to the prison. The soup peers in. Chris! Chris! She knocks on the cell door, then bangs with her fist. Nothing. She unlocks the door and the prisoner is lying on the floor, face down, his head near the door. Prisoners are known to converse with fellow prisoners by shouting under their doors, sometimes for hours depending on the topic of conversation. Lying that way could cause positional asphyxia, if left for too long in the wrong circumstances. The worst part, though, there were 3 slices of toast lying on the prisoner's back. The night officer is supposed to provide toast to the prisoners, as they have no cooking facilities in their cell, and conduct a welfare check at the same time, ensuring they receive a response from the prisoner to ensure they're okay. The soup bends down and shakes the prisoner without a response and feels for a pulse. "No pulse," she says. She beckons for 2 officers to come in and then has them lift the prisoner out onto the walkway. They begin CPR immediately. I remember the unit being eerily quiet, the other prisoners not making so much as a peep. The prisoner is blue, almost purple, and his eyes are partly open. The soup leans down again and feels for a pulse, but shakes her head. The officers continue CPR until the medical team rush in shortly after and immediately take over. They begin to hook up their defib machine, and one nurse asks the soup to arrange an ambulance. "Already on the way," she responds. The nurse nods, and they continue to apply the machine. They zap the prisoner, again and again, but there is no response. A doctor enters the unit and also attempts to work on the prisoner. The minutes seem to drag as the doctor and nurses desperately try to save him, hitting him again and again and again. Finally, the ambulance officers arrive and assist the nurses. They continue working for a long time, almost an hour, before they declare the prisoner deceased. He's covered in a sheet and left where he is as police are called in. He was 28 years old and a father of 2. When the police arrive, they conduct an investigation, talking to staff and taking photos before the body is allowed to be removed. It takes another couple of hours for everything to be returned to normal, and the prison is finally unlocked. In situations such as this, the entire prison remains in lockdown. We begin to conduct prisoners' runouts, escorting them one at a time to a designated choke pen. The mood is very solemn in the unit as we escort each prisoner out and begin our trap-to-trap duties. It's nearly lunchtime count by the time everything is caught up with. The unit noise is almost back to normal, prisoners shouting to each other under the doors. The occasional burn of some boneyard dog somebody has an issue with. The medical trolley enters the unit and lunchtime medications are dished out, trap to trap. It takes about 10 minutes, and as the trolley exits the unit, count is called, and Paul and Jacob go trap to trap and conduct muster. When they finish, they show me the numbers and I call it into control. Count is called correct 10 minutes later, and we start the afternoon session. Shortly after count is called correct, the phone rings and there are visitors on the way for a prisoner. I organize for him to be brought out of his cell and into the visits box, a small cubicle we have in the unit, divided in half by a bench and thick glass. There's a small grill beneath the glass through which the people communicate with each other. The phone rings again, and we have a new prisoner that needs to be picked up from the admissions building, which I allocate to another 2 officers. Because every single move and escort takes 2 officers, the staff numbers can reduce quite quickly if a few things happen, so I wait with some moves to ensure we don't end up short. I'd rather take my time escorting prisoners than end up with too few officers in case something kicks off. Once the visit is finished, 2 officers, Russell and Jacob, head down to pick up the new arrival. 2 other officers, Janine and Paul, prepare the cell he'll be going into. They prepare a bed pack, a TV. Yes, solitary these days entitles them to a TV, and when I say entitles, that's exactly what I mean. These prisoners know their entitlements, and rather than ask for them, they demand them. And food utensils. They can bring food, reading material, drawing material, clothing, and a kettle with them. Nearly all the comforts of home. They return a short time later accompanying their prisoner, Ryan Blake. He's checked in, interviewed, and taken to his cell. As he has been here before more than once, Ryan knows the procedure and as such makes the process a lot simpler, not needing us to run through the finer details with him. He is upbeat and chirpy as he is led away, greeted by friends who are shouting at him from under their doors as he walks to his cell. "Blakey!" one yells. "Hey, crazy cunt, what you doing back in this joint?" another shouts. He looks in the direction, smiling, giving them a thumbs up. "Jack's got me doing a burg," he yells back. There are several laughs from behind the doors. "Allegations, brother, allegations," one finishes as he enters his cell. His cuffed hands put through the trap and a bolt lowered to hold his hands in place. The door is closed and his handcuffs are removed through the trap. The bolt lifted again and the trap resealed. It never ceases to amaze me just how happy they are to come here. It only takes a few minutes before the chatter restarts, the crew welcoming their new tenant to the building. There isn't much to report for the rest of the day. Runouts happened without incident, the afternoon medical run was completed without too much fanfare, and dinner was dished out to the prisoners, the meals re-warmed and served up door to door by the staff. The night staff member came in just before lockdown muster, and we did a brief handover before heading out of the prison to end our day. Monday, July 2nd. Worked in the visit center today. Received news that the officer from the previous morning's event had been suspended, pending an investigation. Not good. I head straight to the visit center and am placed in the back again. There are 3 female officers already manning the front, so me and a couple of guys are only too happy to man the back and stare at penises again for the day. It's a good opportunity to compare, I guess. The 2 officers working with me today are both new from the recent intake, and as such, quite fresh. I'll have to guide them and try and show them the ropes a bit. It can be quite confronting to have to conduct endless strip searches when still new, but it does get easier with time. Raj and Roger are both keen to learn, and I'm also happy to teach. Our shift starts after count is called correct, and we await our first couple of customers. The list isn't too bad today, with protection first and last, and mainstream in the middle. The first lot of prisoners only number 14, so we should be able to get through them relatively easy with our inexperienced team. I manage the book and enter all the prisoners coming and going into the building. I also allocate lockers and which strip room to enter. My 2 off-siders take a strip room each. The first 4 crooks show up within a few minutes, and I conduct a couple of the strips for the new officers to follow, highlighting which parts to focus on. Once they are all processed, I speak to both officers and highlight the importance of being extra vigilant when they return from the visits. This is one of the main areas of contraband introduction when involving visitors, and we really are the last line of defense if anything does get through. They nod and acknowledge the instructions. As we wait for the next group to arrive, I share the syringe story with them from my previous time in here, and the laughing lasts until the next group enter the door. See June edition. 3 more prisoners enter with their escort officer, and I enter them in the book, directing 2 to their respective strips. The third, a prisoner called Cooper Taylor, stands quietly awaiting his turn. I ask him if he's excited about his visit, and he tells me that he can't wait to see his partner and little girl. She is 1 next week, and I see the sadness in his eyes when he tells me he won't see her for her birthday. I tell him that she has probably a very good reason to try and stay out of prison, and he nods as Raj beckons him over. The prisoners continue to come in sporadically over the next hour. I call the 2 officers over and remind them of the importance of being really thorough with the strips once they start coming back out. I highlight the fact that they can hide things in their mouths, butts, and eye of their penises, between their toes, anywhere really. Eventually the first ones start exiting, take 2 straight in and conduct their strips. I can see they're taking their time, which is good. The last group of prisoners come in for their visits, and we have a bit of a crossover. A couple start arcing up, but we quickly settle them down and continue to process the groups. As each prisoner is finished with their exiting strip, I contact their units for their escorts, who enter soon after. The day is running pretty smoothly, and it feels like a well-oiled machine for 3 blow-ins who don't normally work in here. I see Cooper coming back out, a smile missing from his face. He's looking quite stern, not angry, just serious. Roger calls him over and conducts the strip. I spot for him and don't notice anything out of the ordinary. I ask him how his visit went, and he said it went great. Loved seeing his baby girl, a smile appearing but quickly fading again. I call for his escort back to Yarra North, and they are there within a few minutes. I decide to give the unit a call and just give the officers a heads up that even though his visit went well, he seemed nervous about something. Maybe nothing, but it doesn't hurt to give a heads up. They thank me and hang up. We process each prisoner as they come back out from their visit, and pretty soon it's another waiting game for mainstream. It doesn't take long, and before we know it, we have a room full of ins and a few outs, all waiting to be processed. A couple of them try to burn the new officers, but we quickly process them and move them on. It's a game to them, and they'll know exactly how to play it, especially when they've finished what they came for and it's 5 minutes before count. The speed with which they're processed can be the difference between making it back to the unit for lunch or remaining here for the muster. So, they manipulate the system by playing the game. Make an officer uncomfortable, and he'll process you next to get you out of there. Unless, of course, it's an officer with some experience behind him who will go the opposite and make them last in line instead. Like I said, it's a game. Lunchtime muster is called a short time later, and thankfully we managed to process all the prisoners who had finished. We walk around the building to count our numbers, including the front, and give our tally to the desk staff. They call it in, and 5 minutes later it's called correct, signaling the afternoon session. 10 minutes or so pass, and more prisoners enter for their visits, while others have completed theirs. The game starts again for the second half. The afternoon runs just as the morning did, and we're processing them in a steady stream. Mainstreamers are soon finished and gone, and protection are ready to begin their afternoon run. Things are flowing just like we were hoping. It's around 4 o'clock when there's a code called on the radio. "Code Mike, Yarra North," is the call. I checked the sheet, and there are no prisoners due from that unit for visits, as they all pretty much had the morning stretch. We continue to process the ones we have, and then wait for the code to be stood down. A minute or so later, a second call comes across the radio, and it is the sort of call that brings shudders. Not because of what it is, but because you can actually hear the panic and anguish in the officer's voice. "Yarra North, I need urgent medical help in Yarra North." As we still have a number of prisoners waiting to be stripped and a couple now coming out, none of us are able to go and assist the unit. Another minute passes and we hear radio chatter pick up about an ambulance being on its way, gates to be manned and ready for them, and staff readying themselves to go on the escort to the hospital. We see a number of officers running past our door, and it doesn't look good. No new prisoners will be escorted to the visits area while the code is in progress, so all we can do is wait once we have finished processing everyone. I see one of my mates come walking past the door, and I crack it to ask him what's happening. "Crook just died in Yarra North. OD," he says. I close the door. Fuck. 2 in 2 days, I think to myself. Another 20 minutes pass and a soup comes in through the door. It's Bruce, and he has a very serious look on his face. I ask him if everything is okay, and he shakes his head. Think he swallowed a balloon. He doesn't need to tell me who the prisoner is. I had a suspicion, which, in time, is proven correct. Cooper Taylor. I shake my head, but I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, this is prison, and he could have swallowed that balloon for any number of reasons. From being threatened or forced to money or favors. I know there's one child that isn't going to care why. She just lost her dad. The prison is locked down for the rest of the day. Ambulance and police officers remain in the prison for a couple more hours, and we have already gone home by the time everything is cleared. I find out from a friend later in the evening what happened, as far as they could tell. Cooper's visitor had been strip searched when she came into the prison, but nothing was found. They suspect she hid the balloon in her vagina. Video footage rules out the balloon being in the nappy, as neither mom nor dad ever reach into it throughout the visit. Taking an infant, or any visitor for that matter, to the bathroom instantly converts the visit to a boxed one, meaning no contact, and that didn't happen. They do see Mom reach into her own pocket quite deep and shuffle her hand around, suspecting she had ripped a hole in her pocket so she could reach in and pull it out. There was a packet of chips on the table between them, and she had simply pulled the balloon out, reached for a chip, leaving the balloon in the packet. And then Cooper went in for a handful, including the balloon, and simply put the lot in his mouth and swallowed, together with a swig from the orange juice they had. I was told that as the officers were conducting CPR on him, Cooper began leaking thick reddish-brown fluid from his mouth and nose. The term he used was, he looked like a frozen Coke machine. I felt sick, but more so, I felt sad. Not for Cooper. Prisoners make their own choices and I have no sympathy, especially when drugs are involved. But I do feel sad for his daughter. Tuesday, July 3rd. I'm rostered in visits again today and find a familiar smile as I enter the unit. Claire's smiling face greets me, and I welcome her back after her hot watering incident the previous month. See June edition. "Welcome back, stranger. How you feeling?" I ask her. "Good. Glad to be back," she responds. "You are soup today?" She nods at this, and I'm happy to see her back again. I'm working with the same crew as yesterday, and that is a good thing. They did well, and I was glad to be with officers that were as keen as them. I check the list and see it will be quite a busy day. It is an entire day of mainstream, and that means prisoners will be coming and going without escorts all day. Raj and Roger enter a few minutes later. We shake hands and they put their bags away. They're keen to discuss the death from the previous day, and I fill them in on what I know. I also reassure them that there's nothing they could have done. We aren't allowed to perform internal searches with prisoners or visitors. As sad as it is, what happened was one of the prisoners' own doing. We leave it at that, and just as the two put gloves on, the door buzzes and 4 prisoners enter, signaling the beginning of another day of strips. 2 prisoners take seats and 2 are taken into separate strip rooms as Raj and Roger begin the first round. I can hear one of the prisoners arc up, annoyed at how slow the process is taking, and Raj calms him down. I go and stand just behind Raj, making myself visible. Sometimes just having another officer present is enough to stop a situation from escalating. It works on this occasion, and once finished, he heads inside. Sometimes complaining over an extra 30 seconds is not worth risking your visit over. The door buzzes, and another 5 prisoners are let in, while Raj and Roger finish the first group. One of the new ones is a prisoner called Tully Johnson. He is renowned for baiting officers, and at 6'6" can be quite intimidating. His favorite target? New officers. He sits, already grinning as he checks out the 2 newbies working with me. He looks at me and waves. "Hi, boss," he says, grinning widely. "Hello, Tully," I respond. Roger beckons him over, and his grin broadens as he stands and enters the strip room. I can hear him begin almost immediately, his voice loud and obnoxious. I stand just behind Roger, but Tully knows our tricks and doesn't let go. He is currently discussing the prettiness of Roger's man bun, asking him if he's had it long and what his boyfriend thought of it. I'm not surprised when Roger begins going faster. I ensure he still performs all the right checks and we move him on, the other prisoners laughing as he walks past. We finish the rest of the group after a few minutes and enjoy a small break, the place empty. We expect another 22, staggered between now and lunchtime, some 3 hours away. A code mic is called for one of the far units, and we can breathe easy as no prisoner movements occur during a code. I walk in the front and see how the visits are going. 3 female officers are manning the front and wave at me as I walk into the station. Julie, Rachel, and Emily are all experienced officers, the least having 4 years. They have several monitors in front of them from cameras scattered around the large room. A children's section is off to one side, and there are a couple playing there now. I see one of the cameras is trained on Tully, who is being visited by a blonde lady wearing tight jeans and a tight t-shirt with a jacket that is hanging open around her. I leave the ladies to it and head back to the strip area. The code is stood down a few minutes later and the buzzer goes off a few minutes after that. Another 3 prisoners enter, as 2 from the front also return. We begin processing each and sending them on their merry way. We're about to send the last of them out when I hear yelling from the front, followed by a code alpha in visits. Raj ushers the last prisoner out as Roger and I bolt to the front, the yelling now louder. As we reach the visits hall, we see Emily and Rachel standing near Tully, that wide Cheshire grin beaming. He is holding something, and it looks like he spilled something down the front of his shirt. His girlfriend is also standing and has the same thing over her face. As we get closer, we see the issue, and it's pretty straightforward. What he is holding is his dick. What he has spilled is semen across his girlfriend's face and on his t-shirt. He begins putting his dick back in his pants as other prisoners begin howling and cheering. A mom has gone over to her children in the play area and is shielding them. Tactical officers burst in and began escorting Tully out of the area, that Cheshire grin never wavering. His girlfriend is also grinning as she is wiping semen from her face, hungrily licking it from her fingers and giggling. The scene is quickly brought under control, and within a few minutes the visits are back to normal. The dozen or so prisoners still seeing their visitors have calmed again, and within an hour, all the prisoners have been rotated out, new ones taking their places. Lunchtime muster comes and goes without incident, and we continue to process prisoners throughout the afternoon. Around 2 o'clock, a code alpha is called for one of the back units. We have half a dozen prisoners currently being processed and are unable to attend, although we see quite a few officers go rushing past our door. The call was from a female officer, and her panic was clearly conveyed through her voice. A few minutes pass and a second call is put out, requesting all available officers. It lets the prison know that it's more serious than just a simple confrontation. We only have a couple of prisoners left, and Raj runs out the door to assist. Roger and I continue with our duties, finishing the last 2 together. When the prisoners are through to the hall, we follow and see the girls talking. We head over, and they tell us that 3 officers have been assaulted in Tambo West, one quite bad. Jeff Stebbins was knocked out cold, and another had a broken jaw. The female officer had managed to call a code, but was also attacked. We didn't know how bad yet. This was definitely not a good start to the month, and we still had almost 4 weeks to go. I was about to ask Roger if he wanted to run down when another call came across the air, a code Charlie. Roger looked at me puzzled, and I mouthed "lockdown" to him. The entire prison was about to be locked down. That would mean resources were stretched to breaking point, and if something extra kicked off now, they would struggle to respond. "Sorry everyone, we have to lock down the prison. Visits, unfortunately, are canceled for the time being," Emily calls out, and we hear a group sigh reverberate around the center, some swearing and one prisoner beginning to argue. But Emily holds her own and shuts any argument down. "You heard the code, guys. We have to lock down." I'm thankful that the current prisoners in the center don't include troublemakers. It appears that most of them are fairly new, and the only 2 long-termers are both in their 60s and mostly beyond confrontation. We shuffle all the prisoners to the back and begin to process them, most clearly not happy. But unfortunately, our hands were tied, and they seemed to understand. A couple of officers had been allocated to help us return the crooks back to their respective units, and the visit center is cleared out by the time we return from our first drop-off. The code stays in place for the rest of the day, and the prison remains in lockdown. All up, There were 4 officers hurt, 3 requiring medical attention. 5 prisoners hurt, with 4 needing medical attention. The unit also had OC spray deployed and would need to be decontaminated. A number of staff were overcome by the effects and also took the rest of the day off. There were several ambulances deployed to ferry the injured to hospital and extra officers deployed to assist with all the moves. The 5 prisoners who attacked staff were all quickly isolated and removed from the prison entirely, being immediately transported to another nearby maximum security facility. Both Roger and I are redeployed to help with afternoon moves, medical rounds, and meals. We each escort a medical trolley to a unit and conduct medical rounds trap to trap. It's a long process, but just how it is during a lockdown. My legs are well and truly aware of the walking they do for the final few hours, and I'm glad once the final muster is finished. Today was not a good day. Saturday, July 7th. Called in for overtime. Worked as a general duties officer and thus had several duties throughout the day. The prison has returned to normal after the drama from previous days. I check my emails as soon as I get in and read up about all those injured, confirming all are doing well. All have left hospital except for one, and he's doing okay and in very good spirits. I run into Supervisor Bruce Stevens while walking to my first duty, and he whispers that Shane Roberts had been suspended pending an investigation into the rapes of the 2 boys the previous month. See June edition. I shake my head. Why would anyone want to throw away a 20-year career for the sake of plain bad attitude and laziness? We shake hands and part ways. Him to his unit, me to the medical wing to escort a medical trolley to a unit for morning medications once count is called correct. I escort the nurse and her trolley to Tambo East, and as we enter the unit, there's silence. A couple of crooks are milling around the toasters, and one is on the exercise bike in the far corner. A few are sitting around a couple of tables eating breakfast, but other than a couple whispering to each other, the unit is quiet. The nurse wheels the trolley into her dispensing room, and I give the officers in the station the thumbs up to call the prisoners down for morning medication. They comply, and within a couple of minutes, there's a neat line outside the door. It feels eerie to have no noise, and it's a little unsettling. It almost feels like something is in the air, but I try not to let it bug me too much. Each prisoner comes in, shows their ID card, and then, after downing the pills, present their open mouth to me for inspection. One prisoner has forgotten his ID card, but rather than firing up, simply walks back to his cell and gets it, returning a short time later. He goes through the motions of getting his meds, and all prisoners are finished shortly after. I look at the officers in the station and hold my hands up in a "what's going on" gesture, and they shrug their shoulders in a "don't know" reply. I wave bye to them, and the nurse and I head next door to Tambo West. Chalk and cheese are the only way I can describe the transition from one unit to the next, and the units are practically next door to each other. We can hear the shouting even before we open the doors, and the nurse looks at me, grinning. Wow, is all I can manage. She enters her dispensing room, and I enter the unit to find 2 prisoners yelling at each other on the top tier from within each of their cell doors. It appears that one had been offered a single cell on the bottom tier, and the other believed he was more entitled to it. Single cells are a valued commodity. You could sleep in peace, shit in peace, masturbate in peace without constantly having to hide or keep quiet, or hold your shit in for 10 hours because you simply didn't need to go during unlock. When a prisoner transfers into a unit, their name is added to the bottom of the single cell list, and once your name reaches the top, you are offered the next available single cell when a prisoner transfers out. Sometimes the wait can be months, and so things can get quite heated when someone believes they are entitled to one more than someone else. In this case, prisoner Wybeck believed he had a claim to cell 11 over prisoner Earnshaw. One officer, Tom Barkley, was standing next to Earnshaw, red-faced, flustered, and unsure of what to do. Another officer, Mike Renshaw, was yelling for Wybeck to shut the hell up and come down to the station before he called a code. The third officer, Amy Smith, waved at me and called for morning medications. Renshaw ended up going up to the top tier and locked Wybeck down until he calmed down. Wybeck followed all instructions so as not to cop a disciplinary charge and quieted down once the cell door was locked. Earnshaw wanted to continue and was told to let it go and move his shit to the new cell. Meanwhile, a couple of prisoners decided they wanted different doses to what the doctor had prescribed and were voicing their dismay at the nurse for not doing as they said. Funny that. They will try, though. The nurse held her own and put them back in their place, telling them to make another appointment with the doctor. They gave up and complied with her requests, taking their meds and presenting to me. Another prisoner, Frazier, took his pills, turned to me and quickly walked off, but I'd seen the flash of a red capsule, calling him back to show me his mouth a second time. He did, and the capsule was gone. Again, funny that. When we finish our allocation of units, I escort the nurse back to the medical wing and bid her farewell. I next have gate duty in the quadrangle for an hour. There are a number of gates that have adjoining building and corridors, all needing access to protection and mainstreamers alike. As they couldn't mix, we had to act as traffic lights, halting some gates while releasing others. Mainstreamers loved hanging out at their gates while protection prisoners filed past, giving them everything they had. It would be scary to think of what could happen if we allowed them in, or if someone screwed up and mixed them. I manned the gates for an hour, monitoring my radio for movement requests and allocating gates to open and close as needed, each one opened by hand with a key. 2 other officers help and open gates as I allocate them. We take it in turns with who opens and closes gates and who monitors the radio, and in a very short time, the hour is up. It's all fun and games. Once I finish the gates, I have a spare hour before lunchtime count, and I go to visits and see if they need a hand. The duty soup will radio if he needs me, his daily worksheet highlighting when officers are available. I enter the unit just as a code mic is called in Tambo West. As I am on general duties and in between jobs, I head over to see if I can lend a hand. As I enter the unit, I see officers standing at a cell door on the bottom tier, cell 11. I begin to help another officer lock down prisoners. Code mics are normally just medical and don't require units to be locked down, but another officer asked me to help and I comply. I find out that shortly after the nurse and I had left the unit, Earnshaw had moved all his belongings down to his new cell, and Wybeck was compliant and was allowed out of his cell. The officers had seen Wybeck shake Earnshaw's hand, then proceed to jump on the exercise bike for an hour. Without making it obvious, Wybeck had jumped off the bike at some point and entered Earnshaw's new cell. It was quite a bit bigger than Earnshaw and probably scared the smaller prisoner into submission. He had simply snapped the interior lock in place, grabbed the smaller prisoner, and forced him onto the bed, raping him repeatedly for around 30 minutes. The tactical boys already had Wybeck and were walking him out of his cell and down the stairs. Earnshaw was lying face down on his bed, blood on his buttocks and the bed linen. A nurse was inspecting his butt, and the duty soup was on the phone, probably calling an ambulance. A stretcher is wheeled into the unit, and Earnshaw hobbles onto it, face down. A couple of prisoners start hooting, obviously more on Team Wybeck than Team Earnshaw, but one look from an officer and they call it off. The stretcher is wheeled out a short time later, and eventually Earnshaw is taken to hospital. He returned later that night and was taken back to his cell. Lunchtime count is called shortly after, and I stay in the unit to help out with muster and subsequent lunch through traps. The cell is a crime scene, and Intel staff inspect it before anything else. The unit is eventually unlocked, and it goes back to normal quite quickly. I leave to meet the nurse and commence afternoon meds. We head to Campaspe unit first, and as we enter the unit, I see one officer on the top tier doing a security walk. Another officer is sitting in the station, and the third is in the office. The station officer sees me and beckons me over. I don't know them. I walk over and introduce myself, finding out he is from the new course, Frank Turner. He asked me to go and see the officer in the office, as she doesn't seem to be quite right. I walk to the office and walk in, the smell of alcohol quite strong. The officer is sitting at the desk and smiles when she sees me. It's Thelma. Her eyes are bloodshot and she is eating a bowl of grapes. "Everything okay, Thelma?" I ask her. "All good, mate," she replies, but her voice is garbled, her eyes opening and closing in a tired, worn-out parody. "Grape?" she offers, holding up the bowl. I oblige and take one, popping it in my mouth. I sit and about to ask her if she needs help when the taste of vodka fills my mouth. Its strong and bitter taste instantly overtaking my mouth. I spit the grape out in my hand and am about to ask her something when the duty soup enters. He takes one look and asks me to escort Thelma back to his office. She tries to grab her grapes, but he takes them first. She gives him a disgusted look, but follows me out of the office and out of the unit. A couple of prisoners start laughing as we walk past and mutter something unintelligible. Thelma is half staggering as she hangs onto my arm. We don't speak, and I take her to the duty soup's office and sit with her. Eventually, we get a call from the duty soup to say Thelma's husband is waiting out the front of the prison and she's escorted out. It turns out Thelma had been injecting vodka into her grapes and was smuggling them in through the front in her lunchbox. No one had ever checked them, and she had been able to sneak them in for God knows how long. She is suspended pending an investigation. Thelma's special grapes will probably turn into an urban legend eventually. Hopefully she doesn't lose her job completely, although I don't like her chances for keeping it. Another officer had finished my afternoon medical run, and I complete my afternoon by returning to Campaspe, where they are now an officer short. The other two are busy chatting when I come back in, and both begin questioning me when I enter the station. Having an officer drunk on duty is not an everyday occurrence, and before long, the phone begins to ring with inquisitive questions. We spend the afternoon answering a multitude of questions over the phone and have multiple visitors drop in. It's just as well that the afternoon goes by incident-free and the prisoners leave us to our own devices. It ended up being a strange day, considering all that happened, and as I drive home that night, I think about what would make an officer feel so depressed that they would consider smuggling alcohol into a prison to then get pissed on the job, not only endangering yourself, but the officers around you. Sunday, July 8th. Today I was rostered in reception. It is located at the front of the prison and is outside the walls, hence no prisoner contact. There are 6 officers working in the front area and 1 X-ray officer who sits behind a partition and scans all bags and personal items through an X-ray machine. The security measures that are in place to ensure there's no contraband smuggled into the prison include random pat-downs, random strip searches, a metal detector called a wand waved over each person, contraband detection dogs, X-ray machine, and random drug swabs. I am assigned to the X-ray machine, and being a Saturday, know that the day will be a massive one. It is one of the biggest visitor days, and most sessions in the visit center are booked out solid. I begin my shift at 7 a.m., just in time to check the bulk of the day staff coming on for their shift, and it's a non-stop process for a solid hour. Once count is correct, we beckon visitors to come in, and we begin processing each one. There are mums, dads, sons, daughters, friends, and whole families. Some are friendly, while some are not so friendly. Others can be downright painful, especially like one mom who we weren't processing quick enough. "Can you hurry up? Here to see my fucking son," she barks at the crew. "Please don't swear at me. You won't miss out," Samantha responds to the lady calmly, and you just know she gets more wound up. She waves at her to come forward, and the detection dog gives her a once-over. Samantha then takes a swab of her purse, running the detector tab along all sides as well as her hands. Another officer, James, gives the lady a pat down and asks her to turn her pockets inside out, which she does, frowning and mumbling under her breath. Samantha comes back a couple of minutes later and informs the lady that her swab returned a positive reading for cocaine and her visit would be switched to a boxed visit. She begins to holler and complain, her voice becoming louder and louder, but she knows it's no use. If she causes too much of a scene, then her visit will be canceled altogether, and she gives in, again mumbling under her breath. She is led through to a holding room with another group and eventually escorted to the visits area. The day is long and doesn't let up. I run the X-ray machine for the bulk of the day, only taking a break for lunch and a short stint running the wand for an hour. There really isn't much to say about today. It's just a busy day of processing visitors without any flare-ups or incidents. We hear a couple of code mics in the prison, but they are normal run-of-the-mill codes with nothing really to report. One was a bit bizarre where a prisoner was doing push-ups with his feet up on a chair. He was apparently trying to impress his mates and was clapping his hands in between each push-up and ended up falling down flat on his face. 2 teeth snapped on the concrete floor and cutting his lip quite badly. Other than that, it was a run-of-the-mill day, and I'd rather not bore you with filling each page with meaningless words that won't hold your interest. Wednesday, July 11th. Today I was called in for overtime and chose visits again. I enjoy working in here, especially if I'm out the back. It's like a little hidden world, away from the outside. It's just a place to do your processes and go home. Raj is with me again, and I greet him as I walk in. Russell Rosley is there as well, and we shake hands. "You're going to love today, Mr. King, sir," Raj says to me, beaming a moon smile at me. "Why?" I ask. He holds a sheet of paper out to me. My smile grows as I inspect it. All the visits for that day fill less than half the page. 14 in total. "What?" I say, but my smile remains intact. Vanessa Green walks in from the front. "Morning, gents. How do you like the list for the day?" "Is this for real?" I ask her, and she nods. I fist pump the air. "Now that is the sort of OT I like," I add. "That list and OT? Lucky fuck," Russell says, disgusted, but he's joking, slapping me on the back as he walks past me. "Why so small?" I ask of Vanessa, and she shrugs her shoulders. I don't complain and put my bag away. We have 6 prisoners between now and lunch, and then 8 for the afternoon. The last booked in for 4:30. I find out later that the visits booking system malfunctioned and all visits were scrubbed, only able to be rebooked the day before. There wasn't enough time to fill the schedule, so we've been given a gift and no one complains. The first couple of prisoners enter soon after, and Raj and I process them while Russell mans the book. I strip my prisoner, inspect his clothing, check him, and allow him to redress himself. He heads inside, almost skipping. Raj finished his as another 2 prisoners enter. I repeat the process, and within 5 minutes, we're 2/3 through our morning workload. I follow the prisoner through the door and go and sit in the officer's station in the visits hall, greeting the officers there. Vanessa is monitoring the screens and, judging by the quietness of the room, doubt whether she needs to focus too hard. There are only 4 prisoners, and only one has more than one visitor. We talk shit for an hour or so, even giving the prisoners a little extra time. The others ask me about Thelma, and I tell them what I know. It's a sad story, and we don't dwell on it too long. After giving the prisoners an extra 20 or so minutes, we take them back and reprocess them back in. They all check out clean, and as we send them out, our last 2 for the morning come in. They are processed and in to their visitors in a few minutes. Lunchtime muster occurs during their visit, and again, we give them extra time. Once their time is up, we usher them back to the strip rooms, and they are all jovial, happy to have been given extra time. They are finished and leave the building as we wait for the afternoon rush to come. The afternoon is even better than the morning. The prisoners come in dribs and drabs, and we process each as they arrive. It's almost one at a time for most of the afternoon, and only once do we have two at once. Once the last is processed and out the door, we sit around again and talk shit for a while. We all know that some days in here can be trying, busy, and quite confronting when crooks or visitors get pissed off, but today is definitely not one of those days. I drive home later that evening whistling, happy to have a fatter paycheck and happy that the day went so well. Today was a good day. Thursday, July 12th. Today I was rostered in admissions. I know just what to expect as I make my way there, knowing I will be staring at penises again all day. It's a funny place to work with some of the humor thrown around, certainly not fit for human consumption. If the things said inside prison were spoken out in the real world, you could bet that people would find themselves out on their ear in no time. For some reason, things are just accepted in prison, though. I go and see the officer that has the day's run sheet and see that the day is pretty average. There are around 20 courts for the morning, and then around the same transferring out of the prison after muster. The afternoon has around a dozen or so prisoners transferring into the prison. Compared to some days, it can be seen as a fairly easy day. This week was starting to look like a cruise in the park, although nowhere near as easy as the week between Christmas and New Year, when the transfers and courts come to an almost standstill. We begin processing courts almost immediately, stripping each one and placing them into a holding cell. It's a little after 6, and everyone is still sleepy, so no one is really thinking about firing up. The process doesn't take too long, and before the sun is even rising, we're hoping to load the prisoners onto their respective buses. Once all the prisoners are all loaded, we have breakfast. Count is called, and as we're empty, it's just a simple waiting game for us until it's called correct. Once it is, we wait for our transfers to make their way up to admissions, and we begin the task of processing them out. They bring all their property from their cell up with them, and we have the rest of their property stored in a tub. Once they are up here, it's just a simple process of marking off a checklist to ensure they still have everything they took to their cell or deleting what they have disposed of. It's also the perfect time to see just who has been helping themselves to other people's property via standovers or theft. There are usually a couple per day, and today is no different. One crook in particular has 4 different pairs of runners, 3 Nike and 1 Asics, yet there are only a single pair of prison-issued runners on his property sheet. After quite a bit of arguing back and forth, he finally gives in and surrenders 3 pairs, being allowed to keep 1. Of course, he chooses the most expensive-looking Nikes. All the transfers are eventually processed and sitting in their cells waiting for their buses again, each heading in a different direction. They start to get restless around 11 o'clock and begin banging on their cell doors. Some of the officers do the rounds, letting them know that the buses shouldn't be too far away, but we don't know how long they will be, and pretty soon the building is echoing to the sounds of cell door bashing. The clanging reverberates through the corridors and makes conversations difficult. Fortunately for us, it's not our first day, and we know how to sweet-talk them, bribing them into silence. Lunch. We simply start to hand out sandwiches to the prisoners, and pretty soon admissions is sweetly quiet, like a daycare center during afternoon nap. Shortly after, the buses begin rolling in, and we load each as they show up. Within half an hour, we're empty again, all transfers now out for their road trips. Lunchtime muster is called shortly after, and again, we pull the lucky straw, being empty of prisoners. It is called incorrect some 20 minutes later, and we wait as the prison conducts a recount. It is finally called correct 45 minutes late. Immediately upon correct, buses begin to roll in with some of our afternoon transfers. There are 4 from one jail and 2 from another. There's also a third bus with a couple of court returns. Once the paperwork is all checked out, we begin taking them off the buses and putting them into individual cells until they can be properly inducted. The court returns are taken around to the strip rooms and processed back into the jail. I take one, and another officer takes another. I begin the stripping process, then hear the officer next to me begin his. He's fairly new, but has never worked in admissions before. He has a spotter, just like me, but he is being allowed to run it his way. "Okay, let's strip down to your birthday suit and hand me your clothing," he begins. The prisoner must have been having a bad day, because he begins heckling the officer instead. "Want me to strip, you homo fuck, like this?" he says, as he strips his pants and jumper, tossing each item to the officer, who in turn passes it behind him to a spotter for inspection. "Like what you see, faggoty freak?" The officer doesn't speak, but continues with the strip. The prisoner is naked now and grabs his dick, twirling it around in a circle. "Could you stop masturbating and let me conduct this strip search?" he finally says, and the prisoner starts yelling more abuse. "I bet you'd love me to masturbate for you. Love what you see," he says, and the officer fires back just as fast. "I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. I can't see it." He then beckons for the prisoner to present his fingers, hands, open mouth, armpits, penis, butt, and feet for inspection and completes the process. When the prisoners are gone, I pat him on the back and congratulate him for keeping his cool. He did well under the circumstances, and he thanks me for the compliment. All of a sudden, there's a commotion coming from one of the main cells where the 4 prisoners held. One of the officers lowers the trap and peers inside, immediately withdrawing, holding his nose. "Boss, he shit himself," comes through the trap, and upon looking inside, I see 3 prisoners holding their noses, almost climbing the wall. I crack the door and wave them out, placing them in the adjoining cell. The stench is unbelievably strong. The 4th prisoner decided he wanted to let rip in his pants. He simply sat on the bench watching as the others filed out, not embarrassed in the least. I closed the door again and am glad not to be a regular. They would need to take him out, have him wash and change, and then interview him. Another bus arrives, and it's more courts. We take them off and into the building, filing past shit pants, and take them to the strip rooms. They're all processed and returned to their units within a few minutes. Shit pants is escorted through to a holding cell with a shower and given a new set of clothes, the soiled ones bagged in a hazmat bag. Once he is finished, he is also processed and soon in his new unit. The rest of the day is a similar process and no events worth mentioning. Today was a good day. Friday, July 13th. Today I was rostered as a urinalysis officer. In layman terms, I was going to be conducting piss tests all day. But today was Friday the 13th, and of course, nothing was going to be as simple as that. There were 2 teams of piss testers, and each team consisted of 3 officers. One who would be manning the booth and contacting units to send prisoners up, the other 2 actually conducting the tests. My offsider, Tony Malone, see June edition. I literally groaned inside when I saw him. All I could ask myself was, who had I pissed off to deserve this? But I knew there was nothing I can do, so I shook hands with him and the other officer, and we checked our list. We had 30 names on it and planned our strategy for the day, who we would start with, which units, and where we would end. Once we had finished, Tony and I entered the test room, and the 3rd officer went into the booth and began contacting units. We ensured we had all the equipment in good supply and ensured we wouldn't run out of anything. The first prisoner arrives and we take him into the test room. Our first job is to strip him and ensure he doesn't have anything on him to adulterate the sample, or possess a clean sample which to substitute for his own. Prisoners have many varied and ingenious ways with which to mess with the urinalysis process, The most common is to cut the finger off a rubber glove and have a clean prisoner piss into it. Then they tie it off and somehow hide it on their person, the methods of which are numerous. It takes a very alert officer to pick up a fake sample, but it does happen quite frequently, so we remain vigilant. I start the stripping process, and Tony takes care of bagging the sample once we have it. The room is set up in such a way that the officers have a perfect view of the prisoner no matter which way he turns. There's a toilet in the far corner and a convex mirror hanging on the wall above. When the prisoner turns to urinate, we can still keep an eye on what they are doing. The prisoner strips for me, and I inspect every piece of clothing he has. I then inspect him from a distance, paying particular attention to his anus, underside of his penis, and foreskin, common hiding places. They all check out, and he gets dressed again. He grabs a jar and urinates into it. Once he finishes, Tony seals and labels the jar, then seals and labels the sample bag. The prisoner signs each process and once completed, is allowed to return to his unit. When we let him out, there are already 3 prisoners waiting in holding cells. We ask each if they're ready to piss, and one of them is. We lead him into the room and repeat the process, paying particular attention to his underwear and pockets of his track pants. They all check out, and he takes a jar and immediately begins to urinate. We repeat the process once he is finished, and when he leaves the test room, we're down to 28 to finish. We do our rounds of the holding cells, and another one is happy to have a go. We lead him into the room, and he seems a little too keen to begin. My senses are instantly piqued when he is smiling and laughing about having to do a piss test. But his strip checks out fine, and he produces as asked, nothing out of the ordinary. We finish bagging and tagging his sample and lead him out of the room. As he passes the holding cells, "All good, boys," to the prisoners in the cells and walks out. Now I know something is up. I ask Tony if his sample was warm, and he nods. "Think he got one by us?" he asks. "I know he got one by us," I reply. "Just don't know how," I add. We knock on a couple more cells, and another prisoner is given the go-ahead to produce. I switch positions with Tony this time to try and see a different point of view. The prisoner again is all smiles and complies with Tony's requests. I can sense something is odd, but am unsure of what. He takes a jar and turns towards the toilet, shielding himself from our eyes. We can see the mirror, but can't quite make out his hands and penis. I can see that he is fiddling a bit and sneak over while he is concentrating and looking down. I peer around his body and cringe. Sticking out the end of his dick are 3 straws, each with a tiny eraser you find at the end of pencils jammed into the end. "I'll take those," I say, and the prisoner just about jumps into the toilet bowl, completely unaware that I was there. He was trying to unplug the straws and hadn't heard me. He pulls all 3 straws out and tries to throw them in the toilet, but I grab his arm and Tony grabs the straws. We are gloved up, by the way. He surrenders and gives up, the smile finally leaving his face. "How the hell did you jam them down there?" I ask, but he isn't talking. We lead him back to a holding cell and inform him he will be waiting for the soup. "Nice job," I say to Tony, and he smiles back. We bag the straws, each one cut down to around 4 inches, and it looks like they are melted closed at one end. Together, the 3 straws held just enough urine for the sample to be sufficient. As we bag the evidence, I wonder how many more of the prisoners had hidden samples shoved down their piss holes. I cringe again. We ask the cells again, and another prisoner volunteers. He is morbidly obese and is out of breath after walking the 20 or so steps from the holding cell to the piss room. I can see as soon as he turns to piss that he isn't hiding any straws in his penis. For one, it is almost completely hidden and only about an inch visible. The other reason? He cannot reach it. He struggles to reach it with one hand while trying to twist as hard as he can, but it is almost near impossible. He exhales loudly and manages to just grip the head, grunting and groaning while trying to keep a hold of it. He farts loudly from the straining, apologizes, then tries again to grab it after it slides out of his reach as he breathes. I ask him if he'll be able to piss, and he says he'll manage, just to give him some time. We oblige and wait. He takes another 5 or so minutes to finally manage to hold the jar and piss enough urine into it to be accepted. He washes the jar, then hands it to me, and I label and bag it, him signing each step. We escort him to the door, and another one is done. We continue to process urine tests for the morning with little fanfare. All the prisoners, except one, are able to produce on demand. The one that cannot produce, Stan Sutcliffe, has 3 hours to produce and remains in the cell during muster. We ask him again once muster is correct, and he refuses. He has an hour left and is happy to wait. We continue to process the ones called up, and we get through another 8. Stan has just 5 minutes left when we ask him a final time, and he is happy to give it another go. We walk him into the room and do the strip. Once done, he turns to the toilet with his pants around his ankles, desperately trying to piss. He stands there for a good 2 minutes, his face getting redder and redder. "I'm trying, boss," he cries, the strain visible on his face. "Last chance, Stan. You've had 3 hours, man," I say, and he gives an almighty groan as his teeth clench, his face grimaces, and he turns purple. He farts, jerks forward, and a turd comes shooting out of his arse, hitting the floor sideways. The officer in the booth begins to bellow, and Tony starts gagging. Stan begins to apologize profusely, bends and scoops it up in his bare hands. I throw him some toilet paper and squeeze my nose shut. He wipes the floor and deposits the turd into the toilet, flushing it away. The only thought that comes to my mind is that I don't get paid enough for this. The rest of the day is nothing compared to finding straws jammed down the eye of a dick, fat guys who can't reach their dicks, and being fired upon with turd projectiles. The soup drops by a couple of hours later and notifies the crook that he'll be charged with interfering with a urinalysis test and returned to his unit. We end the day by completing 27 of the 30 assigned and are happy when the day is over. It really is a shitty day, and I whistle as I drive out of the place. Saturday, July 14th through Monday, July 16th. Rostered days off. Tuesday, July 17th. Today I was rostered in Campaspe. Not a very exciting shift, and more frustration than anything else. For one, being a mainstream unit, you're stuck in the officer station for pretty much the entire shift. It begins to get really monotonous after an hour or so, and by lunchtime, you're ready to put on a white jacket. Backwards. I'm rostered with Vanessa Green and Russell Rosley, and I'm grateful that I have someone to chat to at least. We begin with morning muster, and it's called correct a short time later. I begin to unlock the cells as Vanessa begins to get things ready for the moves around the prison. Being a mainstream unit, prisoners don't need to be escorted, but are allowed to move around themselves as long as they are in possession of their ID card. The ID card has a barcode, and some of the gates have readers on them, making their move less of a hassle. They can get to far more places alone. That makes it easier on officers, but unfortunately, it also means we don't get to leave the unit for escorts. For me, personally, I prefer protection, so you can at least leave the unit occasionally to go and escort a crook. The day turns out to be a simple, run-of-the-mill shift with very little to write about. It is, however, a very good day. Wednesday, July 18th. Today, I was rostered in admissions again. As I walked into the unit, Raj met me, and I learned that he has been offered a permanent gig in here. I congratulate him and put my things away. He tells me that the list for today is quite decent, and when I see it, know what he means. There are 32 courts, 22 outgoing transfers, and 24 incoming transfers. I put on some gloves and join the crew already processing the courts. Raj is stripping, so I offered a spot for him. He's becoming a lot more confident, even able to tell some jokes along the way. As we finish stripping each prisoner, I point them towards the next officer that walks them to their allocated cell to wait for their ride. It becomes almost a production line, with some officers standing at the counter handing out clothes, others stripping and spotting, some walking crooks to their cells, and others outloading buses as they show up. A couple of prisoners fire up slightly at not being allowed to take books on the bus, but rules are rules, and they're stowed in their property box. It takes a good hour and a half to process all the courts, but all eventually leave on their bus, leaving admissions nice and quiet as morning count is called. A short time later, there's a recount called, and we quickly do a walk around to ensure we truly are empty. We are empty and breathe a sigh of relief. The fault is elsewhere. The problem with a late morning count and unlock is that the prisoners require 12 hours of unlock per day. A late unlock means a late lockup, and the longer it takes, the longer the units remain unlocked. This doesn't affect us here, though, as we have set times to work and no lockups to worry about. A few minutes later, count is called correct, and we await the arrival of our outgoing transfers. It's 10 minutes later, and the first of the transfers begin to roll in. Some with a little property, and some with a lot. It's funny how prison works. A beefy guy shows up and he carries 2 or 3 bags of property. A small and wiry guy turns up and he carries half a bag. It's when a small guy turns up wheeling a tub full of bags that you begin to question the norm. You know that it's either that he is a really friendly kind of guy, or he has the ability to provide either sexual favors or drug-related favors. And you can normally tell which. I try not to get involved in that side, though, as I'm here to strip, and strip is what I do. Raj and I swap roles, and it's my turn to live some nakedness. I begin to strip them, then Raj walks them to their cells. The process repeats many times over, one prisoner leading to the next, and so on. It becomes a repeating highlights reel of naked dicks and butts as I strip one, then another, and another. Nothing found, nothing said, nothing noted. Just one after the other. Halfway through, Raj and I again swap, and he takes the helm. It goes on like that for the better part of the morning until we finally process the last one. Once I close the cell, I sit and take a break with the rest of the crew, enjoying my first cup of coffee since the last one at home. It's 11:30, and the crooks are already banging up, asking where the buses are. Again, we shut them up with food, the sandwiches fulfilling their double duties. Lunchtime count is called shortly after, and we do the rounds in pairs, Raj and I teaming up, him dropping traps and me writing the numbers. Once we have finished, I take the number, 28, to the person on the book, and they call it into control once they have confirmed the number with a couple of other teams. We talk shit as we await count correct. 10 minutes later, count is called incorrect, and we repeat the process, changing team members. I pair up with Gary Dales, a regular in here. Raj teams up with an officer from the last course, Drew Chivalli. I drop the traps and Gary takes the numbers down. Once we complete our second circuit, he confirms the number as 28. Again, that sigh of relief. The book calls it in shortly after, and we sit around once more, talking shit again. 10 minutes later, and count is called incorrect once more. When a count is called incorrect a second time, units are required to swap with nearby units to ensure they aren't making the same mistake. We all head outside and swap with Tambo West, and their staff go and conduct the admissions count. Gary and I decide to stay as a team and do the rounds. When finished, we ensure everyone has the same number, 51, and I call it into control. We patiently wait in silence and let out a unified groan as count is called incorrect again. "For fuck's sake," Gary said, frustrated. "How hard is it to count heads?" I said. We repeat the process a second time, then call in the same number, 51. Count has now been going for over 45 minutes, and I could just imagine the line of buses sitting outside the jail. We sit around some more, literally twiddling our thumbs, and when count is called incorrect again, we almost throw our radios at the wall. With 4 counts now incorrect, we return to our respective units and conduct an ID and hand muster. Every prisoner is identified individually with the muster and their ID. We head back into admissions and are told that the count is 1 under. That means someone is missing and could mean an escape of some sort. With these many recounts, managers and higher are all involved, as an escape could mean severe repercussions. We conduct our recount, and given the complexity, it takes a good 40 minutes to finish. It is now close to 2 hours late. Some of the crooks voice their frustration as we conduct the count, and we tell them there is nothing we can do. They have to grin and bear it just like us. Just as we are about to count the last cell, I hear a string of profanity from the far end of admissions. "What the fuck are you doing in here? Who put you in there?" We all walk over and see a small Asian prisoner, maybe 25 years old. He's pointing at his mouth and shaking his head. He doesn't speak English. He had been locked in a small toilet, situated in one of the far corners of the admissions area. The prisoner looked around and pointed at Jude Trevally. The person who unlocked him is a manager, Shane Thompson. "Did you put him in there?" Shane asks of Jude. Jude is the shade of scarlet and looking very nervous. "He needed to go to the toilet, and all the cells were full," he said defensively. "So you shove him into a staff toilet for one, and then leave him in there and forget about him completely? Is that right?" Shane said, clearly pissed off. "This count has been going for over 2 fucking hours, he yells. Jude just looks at the floor and remains quiet. Shane takes his radio and calls it into control. A second later, count is called correct. People disperse and head off to other areas, leaving Jude to himself. A golden rule when new is ask. If you are unsure of what to do, then ask someone. Jude will no doubt receive a written warning for this little fuck-up, but at least he will learn from it. The buses begin rolling up almost immediately, and all the drivers begin questioning the delay. There's a lot of chatter, laughter, whispers, and pointing as the story is relayed. Jude takes it on the chin and even joins in some of the banter. After all, it was a simple fuck-up and it has been corrected. Given that it was the middle of the day, it didn't interrupt everyone's day too much. If it had been at the end of shift at lockup, then that would have been a disaster. The prisoners are all loaded an hour or so later, and a number of court returns are processed along the way. There are still a few courts to return, and they will keep us busy throughout the afternoon. The good thing is, that day's midday muster is the only excitement to report to you. The rest of the day went smooth and involved nothing more than stripping, more processing, and more counts. Nothing that you haven't heard before, and nothing that you will miss out on not reading about. Today was an interesting day. Monday, July 23rd. Today I was sick and have taken a couple of days off. It's a cold, and the headache gifts me a medical certificate for 2 days. The mental image of a penis sitting on the trap is also still playing on my mind, and I try hard to block it out. I'm not sure what would prompt someone to slice off their own appendage, especially with a plastic knife. Friday, July 27th. Today, I was rostered back in Loudon North. I'm more than a little excited to see how Gus ended up. He seemed so intent on trying to manipulate the system. I'm more than interested to see if he succeeded. As I enter the unit, I see Rachel already at the officer station, and she gives me a thumbs up as she sees me. I point up to Gus's cell. She looks up over her shoulder and makes a growling face. She points at a cell in the bottom corner, and I realize he must have gotten his way somehow. How? I ask as soon as I'm in the station. Tony Malone, she says. What? How? He isn't normally in here. He was in here with 2 blow-ins and didn't bother running it past the soup first. That guy really pisses me off, she replies, and I can see it written all over her face. Looks like Gus managed to get his own way while no one was looking. It happens quite a bit, unfortunately, especially when no regular staff are working in the unit. Crooks take advantage, and you can't really blame them. It is their job, after all. Our 3rd officer came in shortly after, Jacob Davidson. "Hi, Jacob," I say as he approaches, and we shake hands. He's a good officer and always happy to help. He shakes Rachel's hand and goes to put his bag away. "How's the unit been?" I ask. "Pretty good. Quiet as usual," she says, and I know what she means. I hope that is the case today, as I feel a headache coming on. We start to conduct trap-to-trap muster, me with the sheet and Rachel dropping traps. We get to cell 8 and she peers in. The name on the door is Van Fankel. I can feel the expression on his face through the trap, and Rachel doesn't say a word. We continue our count, and once we finish it, call in the number when called for by control. Muster is called correct a few minutes later, and I do the rounds unlocking the cells. The prisoners all begin to exit their cells, and most head for the toasters, a couple to the phones, and one to the laundry. The morning medication trolley arrives, and Rachel heads off to assist them while I check my emails. Nothing noteworthy except one. It's from one of the administration staff. They're writing to ask me whether I would accept a permanent role in Loudon North. I'm instantly torn. I love the unit, the simplicity of it. It's known as one of the retirement units amongst the other officers, and know it's a good place to hang my hat. But the other side of my heart is telling me not to, and the reason being what you're reading right now. I know that if I was to work in a unit, I would not have nearly enough material to be able to fill a month worth of excitement for you to read, especially in a unit as quiet as Loudon North. Admissions maybe, even visits would be okay, but not here. I think about it for a few minutes, then write my response. A very polite, no thanks. Unless, of course, you guys think I should. I've even opened an email address if you'd like me to work in a unit full-time. It's listed at the end of the book. Anyway, I typed my response and pressed send without a second thought. As I close the email, there's a frantic call of a code alpha in visits. I look at the clock and wonder if they would even have any prisoners up there yet. Turns out they did have one. A billet, in for the morning clean before the visitors show. Turns out he had helped himself to some of the staff's lunches and snacks, and when confronted, had taken a swing at the officer, Vanessa Green. She sustained a broken tooth and cut lip, and he was in a world of pain about 2 seconds later when 3 large tactical boys took him to the ground. He is taken to admissions and transported out of the prison about a half an hour later. The process following an assault on an officer is always swift and final, and always with the removal of the prisoner. Subsequent phone calls to visits inform us that Vanessa is fine, just shaken and off to see her dentist. She will most likely have a couple of days off for that punch, and so she should. Jacob, Rachel, and I are sitting in the station drinking coffee when we hear a commotion coming from the far corner of the unit on the top tier. 2 prisoners appear to be having some sort of disagreement, and they are in each other's face. No punches are being thrown, but a lot of finger pointing, and that can be a good indication that things are about to get physical. We all get up, and Jacob and I head over to see what the problem is. Rachel remains in the station, as one officer is required to man the station permanently. We head upstairs and try to calm the boys down. They seem to be arguing over the mop and bucket. "It's fucking my turn. I've been waiting," one cried. "I got it first, mate. Should have been quicker, you dickhead," he yells back. Guys, Jacob yells at them. "It's a mop and bucket. Jeez." "But boss, I've been But he is cut off. There's a scream of pain from the other side of the unit. We look just in time to see Van Fankel drop a bucket and run back to his cell. Rachel is screaming from the officer station, pulling her jumper off. The bastard had thrown a bucket of hot water on her. He used the altercation to his advantage and wasted no time in using his freshly boiled kettle while we were here and she was there alone. I call a code Alpha and request urgent medical help for an officer. I run to close Gus in the cell, and Jacob runs to Rachel. He grabs a blanket and holds it over her as she begins ripping some of her clothing off. People don't realize that when someone is hit with hot water, the hot water can get soaked into clothing and continue burning. She lays down on the floor crying, her pain clearly audible. The doors burst open, a flood of officers come running in, including the nurses. They run to the station and begin treating Rachel, officers helping move her onto a stretcher. The soup heads for the cell holding Gus and cracks the trap, whispering something I don't hear. I know what the next step is for Gus, and tactical boys are already gearing up to enter the cell. "He's just sitting there, boys," the soup says to them, and they peer in. They crack the cell and head in, 3 squeezing into the small room. We hear a cry of pain as they handcuff him and drag him out. The same stony look is on his face and no sign of remorse. They drag him out of the unit, his eyes never leaving the floor. I don't know whether that was his intention or whether he just wanted to hurt Rachel. Sometimes prisoners are known to assault staff as a way of bailing out of a unit when there's no other way out. I decide I don't care what his intention was. I'm just glad he's gone. Whatever his sentence was, he can now add assaulting an officer charge, which can carry up to 10 additional years. I know that with our justice system, he will never get 10 years, but I hope he gets the most possible anyway. Rachel is wheeled out of the unit a short time later, her face covered in some sort of gauze. I gently touch her shoulder as she wheels past me, and she looks at me, her eyes doing the talking for her. The soup stands the code down, and Jacob and I begin to write our reports. We finish almost at the same time, and just sit there in silence for a bit. The unit has taken on that all-too-familiar silence, and we wait for another officer to replace Rachel, who would be on her way to the hospital now. Raj walks in a short time later, and we fill him in on what's happened. He looks shocked and voices his anger. That was how the morning came to a close for us. It's truly sad to see officers, both male and female, assaulted, spat on, have shit and piss thrown on them, be abused, and just be spoken to like shit, just because they work as a correctional officer. Unfortunately, prisoners believe they have a right to treat staff as they do. But every case of assault is passed on to police and fully investigated. In most cases, prisoners are charged and time added to their sentence. The afternoon was the exact opposite to the morning. Everything ran smooth and efficiently. The med runs all went without the slightest hiccup, and musters were done in almost complete silence. When we locked the prisoners in their cells during the final lockdown, a couple of them ask about Rachel and ask us to pass on their well wishes. They are as shocked as we are and know that these sort of units always run smoother when regular staff man them. Having one of the regular staff off injured only means a blow-in comes to replace them, and that can upset the apple cart. Jacob and I walk out together when count is called correct. He says he'll give the hospital a call and check on Rachel, and will let me know. I thank him, and I thank him for his help today. And as I walk through the outside gate and into the car park, I remember one important thought that was told to me by an officer long ago. Any day that you get to walk out of a maximum security prison at the end of the shift is a good day. Today was definitely not a good day. Saturday, July 28th through Tuesday, July 31st. Annual leave. Yay!